Well, good morning, my friends. It's what day is this? Tuesday? Yeah. And it's still a little cold around here, but I'm looking forward to a great day. So we're finishing up the book of Timothy. Second Timothy always makes me sad to finish a book. I love. I just love everything about it. But hope you had a great night last night. We went up to Bluntsville, watched some basketball. My grandsons play. My son-in-law coaches. They're in a tournament, and so they made it to the final. Last night they won, make it to the final. So they'll be playing Hayden Thursday night, and looking forward to hopefully, Lord willing, going to see them play ball. Man, December is fast moving, right? Christmas is really just a couple of weeks away, and man, life seems busy. So it's where we are in our season of life, chasing our tail a lot of days. And so today I think I've got a calm one and looking forward to that. So that's where we are. Listen, we're finishing up Second Timothy, and these are really the last recorded thoughts of Paul. When you think about it like that, man, it's sobering. And I have been a student of Paul since my early 20s and have really enjoyed and benefited greatly just from his writings, obviously because it's spirit empowered and breathed out, but just fascinated with his life and his journey and his all-inness about life. And so deeply appreciate that. We come to the last section. It's a lengthy section, but it's really, I don't think it's hard to it's not complicated at all. We're just seeing him kind of write his thoughts. It's interesting when you start listening to someone at the end of their days. People are on their mind, and that's where Paul is right now. He's thinking through. Obviously, he's writing this. This isn't the first time he's thought these things. This is the first time he's put them on paper, and so. Whether this will be a long little deal today or not, I don't know. Let's just kind of jump into it and see where we are. So he's done with all of, hey, Timothy, you got to fight the fight. You got to be a man of the word. Keep your head down, plow, do the word in season and out of season. Don't get discouraged by the naysayers. Don't get into quarrels and arguments. They only serve to create distraction. These are things that, as you look back on your own life, you realize, man, I should have shut up there, or I should have done more of this, or I should have not been distracted by that. And so this letter has been Paul really reliving his life, telling Timothy how to be sure that he carries the torch to the next deal. Timothy is his go-to man. He is Paul's number one. And it's powerful as you see this relationship develop. But let's look at the text together. And I'm going to do my best to kind of ramble our way through this. I think it's better than trying to outline it or anything else. People are what is on Paul's mind, and that's what I think is important for us to understand. Paul has an inner circle. So what we're going to see is some concentric circles that Paul has. He has an inner circle. He has some others that he's assigned to different ministries. This is his ministry team, and so you see that. You see those who have left him in the ministry. You see those that he's missing and longs to see. Then you also see those who were near him at his homegoing, and then those who were opposing him. And so you see a lot of these things. And then he mentions a few items, and so we're going to just kind of meander our way through this text. So here's what he's saying. Hey, Timothy, do your best to come to me quickly. Now he says that because he knows his time is short, right? He just finished saying, "Hey, I'm already being poured out as a drink offering." He knows his time. He's had his trials. He's had whatever an appeal that there may have been, and it's over. He's just waiting for whenever they call him up. And so that's where he is. And he says, "Do your best to come to me quickly, for Demas, having loved this world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica." Now, we only know about Demas from a couple of places in the scriptures. Paul had worked with him in an area, and Demas is mentioned there as just being one of the men that he that was with him in ministry. No doubt at one time he had been a pastor or whatever. But for whatever reason, and it happens to all of us, doesn't it? Demas, and he gives us a reason. He says, having loved this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. So here's what we know about Demas. He was at one time with Paul. He was at one time one of Paul's messengers, pastors, one of those types. And so he's with Paul, probably watches, a little bit about what's going on in maybe one of the trials or whatever, sees the persecution that's coming on Paul and goes, you know what? It's too hard for me. I'm out of here. Having loved this present world. And really it comes down to that. It doesn't mean that he was in love with the stuff of the world and all that. He just wasn't ready to give his life for the faith. And he said, man, he's chosen the world. He's just going to go do his thing. And Paul has little patience with people who aren't all in some sense. And so this is who he is. And so Demas, he says, having loved this present world, has left me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia. So he sent Crescens, who is another one. He's the only time his name is mentioned here. He must have some connection to Galatia. Paul could have met him there. We don't know. But he's letting Timothy know where all of his soldiers are. Why? Well, because Timothy is going to have to start overseeing these guys as Paul moves on toward his heavenly home. And so he's saying, hey, Crescens gone to Galatia. Titus, he's in Dalmatia right now. Now, earlier Titus was in Crete. Now he's in Dalmatia. And then he says, only Luke is with me. So now that doesn't mean that there aren't any other people. It means Luke, of all of his inner circle, what was once and is not, Luke is the only one with him. Now, Luke is, Luke's a powerful force. Luke has been with him from the beginning. Luke actually is the one who writes the gospel of that Luke tells the story of Jesus. Luke also writes the book of Acts, which we're going to jump into tomorrow. And Luke he's not necessarily a theologian. He's not a preacher. You don't see him doing any of those things. He's more there, I think, as a support and aid, probably financially some. He was a doctor. And so I'm sure there's a financial support that he's given to Paul. He's all in ministry. He's kind of a historian. He's obviously dictates a lot of things since he's right. He took copious notes because the book of Acts is that. And so we know that that's who he was. And so he's there. He says, only Luke is with me. And then he says this, get Mark and bring him with you because he is helpful to me in ministry. Now, Mark, there's an interesting story about Mark. And you know this, I think. Mark went with Paul on the very first missionary journey. He's related to Barnabas. Paul and Barnabas were set apart for the work that God had for them to do, and they began a missionary journey. A little ways through the journey, John Mark decides, man, this thing's too rough. I'm out of here. And so he leaves, goes back home. They finish their journey. They're having a debriefing, and then Paul says, hey, man, let's, at some point in time, Paul says, hey, let's go back and check on everybody. And Barnabas goes, great, man, I'll go get Mark. And Paul says, no, you won't. No, I don't have time for Mark. He's a quitter. Now, that's not what he says in the scriptures, but that's the inference. And it created such a division that Barnabas and Paul really had a falling away. And we never hear from Barnabas again. Paul took Silas and off they went, and then ultimately met Timothy and those things. But for John Mark, we do know, and we find in 1 Peter chapter 5, somewhere in there, Peter says that Mark is his son. As does my son Mark, greet you. And so we learn from that though Paul had Timothy, Peter had John Mark. So when Paul found him not useful, Barnabas, son of encouragement, obviously kept him strengthened and encouraged. And then at some point handed him over to Peter, or Peter rather said, hey, let me have him and grow him in ministry. And so he did so. So it's interesting to me how people kind of cycle around, right? Man, just don't give up on people. Just listen, they come and go, but you never know what God's doing in people's lives. And in John Mark's life, Paul says at the end of his days, hey, go get Mark. He's so valuable to me in ministry. It's amazing. Paul didn't see the value in him. Peter and Barnabas did. They continued to stay the course with Mark, and Mark became a very vibrant part of Paul's ministry. And this is what he's seeing, because he's helpful to me in ministry. Then he goes on, he says, oh, yeah. I sent Tychicus to Ephesus, and so that's where everybody is. So he's saying, hey, Tychicus is the one who's actually taking this letter to Timothy at Ephesus. Then he says, when you come, bring the cloak that I left in Carpus at Troas. So there's another man, Carpus. He's in Troas. Don't know anything about him. But Paul is saying, hey, man, I need this cloak. Interesting, because they must have been hard to come by. I mean, like, you're in Rome, man. They're miles away, days' journeys away from you. There's no cloaks there. And so obviously Paul's a little cold in that damp dungeon area. Winter's coming, and he's like, man, I hope you get here before winter. And so he's saying, hey, bring me that cloak. Now, a cloak you've seen them. They're like ponchos in the Wild Wild West, right? They have a hole in the middle of a blanket, basically, is what it is. And so when you put it on, it's really your shelter. Your neck's sticking out. Everything else is covered. You would wear that, man, when you would sleep. And so, it was, and you would wear it when it rained, all of those things. Keep the snow off of all of those things is what that blanket would do. And Paul's like, hey, man, this old man's needing that blanket. He said, when you come, bring that. Then he says, bring my scrolls, especially the parchments. Now, scrolls, we know what they are, right? They're rolled up. When Jesus was first sermon he preached, they pulled out the scroll of Isaiah. He unfurls it, gets to the place in Isaiah where he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, right? You remember that? And so scrolls were writings. Most likely they were some of the scriptures of the Old Testament, but Paul wanted parchments were more. They were could have been animal skin. Could have been what we don't know what the makeup was, but whatever it was, could have been Paul's writings of which he had recorded and kept. Like he kept a letter of what he sent to others, so he would remember what he sent and all of those things, whatever it was. And some of them were blank. So Paul, what we learn here is at the end of his days, knowing that life's over, he goes, hey, I'm not done reading yet. Isn't that amazing? I mean, he's like, man, I'm in prison. What's he doing? I'm not done reading. Bring me the parchments. Bring me the scrolls. I'm not done reading, and I'm not done writing. Now, we don't have any more writings of him, but the fact that he's asking for those things implies that that's where he is. I love the fact that there's no quit in him. Up until the last day, there's no quit in Paul. And so we see that laid out there. Then he says, and he comes to verse 14, and he says, Alexander the metalworker, or the coppersmith, did me much harm. The Lord will repay him for what he has done. You too should be on your guard against him because he strongly opposed our message. So he's one of the accusers of Paul. Most likely when he went to court, Alexander probably was one of them that stood before him and said, yeah, he's a traitor to Rome. Yeah, he's for a believer in Christ and the gospel and all of that stuff. And so he opposed him greatly and strongly, probably undermining him at every turn. I jokingly say that that's one of my favorite prayers in the Bible. Alexander the coppersmith did me much harm. May the Lord repay him in kind. Because you have those people, right? They're just at you all the time, and you think, man, Lord rebuke them, right? And this is Paul just saying, hey, man, he's going to get his, right? I mean, we're doing the work of the gospel. He abandoned it. He's trying to destroy it. He said, if he makes it your way, or when you get to Rome, you see him on the streets, stay away from him. You have nothing to do with him. And so I love the flavor of the personal aspect of this passage that he's doing here. Then he says this in verse 15. Or verse 16, at my first defense. So, right, you understand, you go to trial, and when you went to trial, it was set up in the area in Rome. There would have been kind of a cross section, much like you see in churches in Europe and all of those. So there's a cross member and there's a lengthy deal. So Nero most likely would have been sitting on his throne in one area. You would have had, and you've seen these kind of things in movies, you would have a row of benches where these would have been the advisors, the legal scholars, all of that for Rome. And then you would have various people observing either low ground, upper balcony, and all of that. And then you would have Paul standing there, and with him would be on one side would be those who were accusing, and on the other would be those who were advocating for him. And he says, when I show up at court, no one's with me. I've got accusers. I've got no advocates. There's Nero, there's all his men, and there's a crowd of people wanting to hear. You get the picture of what's going on. Paul's by himself. In some sense, he sees himself as going into the lion's den when he sees that picture, hearkening obviously back to Daniel. But he says, "At my defense, no one came to support me. Everyone deserted me." Now, this is different than Alexander the coppersmith. They're not opposing him. They're just fearful people. And listen to what he says. May it not be held against him. May the Lord not hold it against him. Look, I get it. It's a tough spot, man. It takes courage and faith to stand before men, knowing that that they have ill will towards you. And so he's like, "Hey, look, I get it. This is hard. How gracious is that, man? I'd be like, where are you?" But Paul's like, "Hey, be gracious." But the Lord, listen to what he says. But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength. He said, "Hey, listen, all my human friends deserted me. But the Lord is faithful. He didn't, and he strengthened me." Can you imagine Paul walking in? There has to be a little intimidation factor. We know that. I mean, Paul's human. And so he walks into this place, probably in chains, guarded by soldiers. He's looking around for some friends, and he doesn't see any. He sees Nero, this maniac, sitting on a throne. He sees all of these accusers over here, and they're probably untold numbers of people. Some he remembers, and some he may not. Some making stuff up, and some just bitter. And he sees most likely Alexander in that mix, and he sees maybe, I don't know who else. Maybe Demas stood over there. We don't know. But whatever it was, he walks in, and you can imagine the trepidation and the fear that creeps over him. And then the Lord just whispers in his ear, right? "Hey, all may leave you, and all may disown you. I will never leave you, never forsake you." And you can almost sense Paul's strength kind of welling up from within his spirit. And this is where he is speaking to us here. And he says, "But the Lord stood at my side. He gave me strength, so that through me the message might be fully proclaimed and all the Gentiles might hear it." All of a sudden, church breaks out in this trial because he gets his day in court. He gets his say. And his say is, there is a Messiah. There is a King of Kings. You're not that, Nero. And this is who Jesus is. And all of you in the balcony, and all of you advisors, and all of you accusers, you too can bend your knee and bow your knee before the risen Christ and give him your life. That's the gospel that he's preaching, that your sins have made a separation between you and God. Just imagine that. He said, so all Gentiles heard it. Everybody had gathered. They all went home and said, "Man, you're not going to believe what this guy said." So even in his court trials, God was being glorified. And then he says this, "And I was delivered from the lion's mouth." Right? He said, "Hey, whew, that wasn't my last day." And then he adds this, "And the Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom." That's an interesting statement. He's not saying God's going to deliver him from death. He's saying every evil attack, God's going to give me a way through it, or a way out. I think here he means God gave this evil attack that came on. He opened a door for me to preach the word. That's been his prayer all through his ministry, that God may open up a door for him to preach the word. Hey, pray for us that God may open up a door, that our speech might be seasoned with the word as salt, that we may boldly proclaim the gospel of Christ. This was what Paul was asking the people to pray as he was doing his ministry through his life. So it's no doubt that's what's going on here. And he's going, "Hey, you know what? I'm not scared. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack, and he'll bring me safely to his heavenly kingdom." One day, these grave clothes of mine, this body's going to, however it's going to go, Paul probably knew it was going to be with the chopping block. It could have been the cross, but I think he knew. And he says, "And to that one who's going to carry me safely home, to him be glory forever and ever." He's so enamored by those thoughts that he just breaks out into a praise right in the middle of this writing a letter. Then he comes down to the final greeting, and this is where we'll leave ourselves today. "Greet Priscilla and Aquila." Now, those have been with him from the beginning. In fact, they were the ones who kind of helped school him to see to see Jesus in the Old Testament. And so they became partners with him, and they helped Apollos, another powerful man of God, understand the scriptures in that sense. And he says of the household of Onesiphorus. And Paul had been in and out of that home. Erastus stayed at Corinth. Now he's kind of rethinking some of the other people. Oh, yeah, Erastus. He stayed in Corinth, man. He's good. I left Trophimus sick in Miletus. He couldn't make it here, or he would, but he's sick, and so he's in Miletus. And then he says, do your best, Timothy, to get here before winter. Eubulus greets you. So it's not like he's all alone there. He's got people, right? Eubulus, Pudens, Linus, and Claudia, and all the brothers and sisters who are coming by. And then he says this, the Lord be with you in spirit. Grace be with you all. Powerful letter. And I'm blessed just by the reading of it. And grateful that you come and let me just share truth with you on these mornings that we do. And so, man, have a great day. Cherish the people that are with you. Pray for those that aren't. And Lord willing, I'll see you in the morning. And we're going to begin reading some of what Dr. Luke wrote about the journeys of Paul and the gospel of Christ. Lord bless you. Have a great day. And Lord willing, I'll see you tomorrow.